brought to you in association with AIB Bank. Well, over the next number of months we'll be visiting various areas of Cork, like Blackrock, Mahon, the Marina, Blackpool, you name it, we're going to be there. And we're even going to venture outside of Cork, westwards through the Leaf Fields out to Ballincollig and eastwards to Cove and Rota. Well, now we'll begin our series with a stroll down the Mardyke. In the days of its glory, the Mardyke was a place of tranquility and unspoilt beauty. It was a pleasant promenade about a mile long and graced on both sides by magnificent elm trees, which when in foliage covered the entire walk. This fashionable avenue was greatly admired and loved by many generations of Corkonians, who celebrated its elegant splendour in poetic verse and well-remembered ballads. In summer, the sloping, sun-drenched gardens of Sunday's Well reached the waters of the Lee and displayed colourful, glowing arrays of flowers and shrubs. Completing the enchanting scene was the Church of St. Vincent dominating the hill. The Mardyke was laid out in 1719 through the ancient swamplands belonging to the Duke of Devonshire by Edward Webber, a Dutchman at his own expense, who was town clerk of the city at the time. He named it Mardyke from a promenade in Amsterdam called Meerdijk, meaning a sea dike or embankment for arresting the encroachment of the sea. The Mardyke was also known as Red House Walk and derived its name from a red brick tea house, also built by Webber, which stood at its western end and occupied the site of the present Sacred Heart Missionaries College. With its tea and fruit garden, it became a fashionable rendezvous and was much frequented during the warm summer months. A poet of Old Cork has left us a vivid account of the pleasures of a walk on the Mardyke on a Sunday morning, particularly as a cheering cup of tea was to be had at the tea house. A laugh and a jest with every egg, an anecdote with every cup of tea and coffee, and a shrug and a smile with every bit of toast or bread and butter. The week's news, the chit-chat of the town, the little anecdotes, the hot tea, the fresh eggs. Webber's tea house changed hands in 1757, and some years later the site became the property of James Morrison, who was mayor of the city in 1784. He built a summer residence and it became known as Dyke House, and in 1909 this became the property of the Sacred Heart Missionaries and was incorporated into a college. The development of the walk proved long and costly and was financed by many methods. By the dawn of the 19th century, however, the rights of the pedestrians were violated by horsemen, carriages and drovers conducting their cattle to the neighbouring fields, which resulted in a long drawn-out war. Time and time again, the owners of vehicles were fined, and there was often violence used against the horsemen and drovers who attempted to ride or drive their cattle on the walk. Eventually, during the mayoralty of John Day in 1807, it was found necessary to erect gates at both ends in order to prevent these intruders from destroying the entire walk, and from there on, the gates were to remain closed at night. Stone seats were placed at intervals for the comfort of the public. After some time, these seats were removed, according to corporation annals, because they were abused by the lower order of the people. They were restored, however, in 1838, but eventually replaced by wooden seats some years later. By the 1860s, the development of the walk reached its peak, and it surely must have been the most beautiful promenade in the country. Evidence of this is clearly seen when a visitor wrote, "It reminds one of a French boulevard, but it is surrounded by scenery that few French boulevards can boast of." But this was about to change. Much development was taking place in the neighbouring fields, especially on the southern ones, with the erection of private dwellings. And its residents were granted vehicle permits by the corporation to drive up and down the avenue. And with the establishment of a sporting institution and the erection of a bandstand, this saw a huge increase in human traffic, and the walk was suffering. This was brought to the attention of the city authorities. In addition, many residents and lovers of the walk wrote strong letters to the newspaper expressing disgust. One such letter, published in the Cork Examiner on Wednesday, May the 24th, 1893, gives us a good insight into the state of the walk, as the writer stressed. "The dyke is certainly not a suitable place now. It was a nice, beautiful walk once, but since the corporation ignorantly and carelessly allowed it to become a depository for foul-smelling muck, the citizens might just as well give it over to its fate." We're heartily sorry for those who have to live there. Soon afterwards, the corporation acted on the wishes of the people and gave the area a general facelift. By the 1920s, the walk had lost its original identity as a promenade and had become instead an access to private and business houses, a school, sport and leisurely amenities. With the huge increase in residents and business vehicles, public cyclists and pedestrians, the surface of the gravelly avenue suffered, and consequently the walk was tarmacadammed with pavements laid along the south side for the pedestrians, especially for mothers with prams and small children. The 1930s saw electricity replace gas for public lighting, and the warm, arched gas lamps which spanned the entire walk were replaced with less attractive, cold lighting fixtures. In the 1940s, disaster struck when it was found that the majority of the elms had become diseased. So they were cut down and rooted up from time to time and weren't replaced. And to make matters worse, the dike caretaker died and wasn't replaced, leaving the walk to fend for itself. In 1952, the Mardyke lost its dignity as a pedestrian walk when the corporation removed the ornamental iron triple gate, which was popularly known as Hell, Heaven and Purgatory. The reason for its removal, according to an old resident of the walk, was it was badly neglected after the death of the dike's caretaker and had become a danger to the public. The dike was depedestrianised, but the railings at the west end were allowed to remain, but concessions were given to prams and bicycles to pass through. In addition to the already mentioned changes, the walk was grossly neglected, and due to its appalling state, the residents of the area came together and formed the Mardyke Residents Association. They called upon the corporation, demanding that the Mardyke Walk be restored to its former glory. In 1977, when news became known that the City Fathers intended to construct a two-lane roadway along the walk, its residents and many good citizens of Cork were up in arms. And one resident stated, "They're not going to butcher my walk." Despite strong protests, however, work commenced on Monday, October the 17th. The new two-lane city inbound roadway was going to be part of a £350,000 scheme to relieve the traffic congestion on the Western Road. During its construction, the dike stream was arched over, and what remained of the non-diseased elms which stood alongside the stream were cut down. And in the spring of 1982, work commenced on the band field for the two-lane roadway link-up between the Western Road and the Mardyke Walk. During its construction, the concrete band platform, which replaced the old wooden bandstand, was removed into the archives of the past, leaving the Mardyke without a bandstand. Thus, the Mardyke had become a speedway. One of the finest sporting complexes in the country is University Cork's football and athletic sports ground. Since they purchased it from the Jennings family in 1925, they have shared it with Rugby Union, Cork Constitution and the Cork Football Club. Over the years, it has witnessed many great occasions, such as international games of soccer and rugby, and of course local derbies in rugby, soccer and track events. Sharing some of the memories of the good old days is Con Hannigan. Con, your memories of the dike go back a long, long way. Can you tell me something of them?
God, yes indeed, Valerie. I say my earliest recollections now of the Mardyke would go back, I say, to the 40s, the early 40s at that. And I remember, I think it was in 1942 that I set foot for the first time on this hallowed spot. And I came up to watch a hurling match between Blackrock and Brian Dillon's. And in those days, the crowds used to be huge. You know, the place would be black with people, thousands of people coming up to both the hurling and soccer games. Mm-hmm. And the atmosphere, you know, used to be electric. Yeah. You had the buskers, you had the hawkers, and then you had Slobby Malone and his three sons, who were famous here in Cork at the time. They used to mind the bicycles.
All right.
And also then, below here on just down a bit the Mardyke, there was an old blind man, and he used to be seated on a stool, and you could hear him, you know, way down the Mardyke, and he used to be shouting out, you know, God bless your eyesight, a penny for the blind man, you know. But they were great days, and then I remember the soccer games here in this pitch, and yeah, well, you know, every second Sunday
you had all games here, Con, hadn't you?
Well, you had a soccer. This was the soccer pitch, Valerie,
yes.
and then next the pitch next, and this was the rugby pitch,
right.
and then you had the hurling pitch just below here. You had three pitches. You had soccer, rugby, and hurling.
And of course, you had the cricket and the boating club further down.
Oh,
so
that's
it was a mecca for sport, really, wasn't it?
No doubt, you had.
What sort of famous names can you remind us of?
Well, here, no, in the soccer pitch, we had Cork United at that time, and Cork United were they were, in many people's opinion, they were the best soccer team that ever played in Ireland. You know, great names like Fox Foley, Big Shawnee McCarthy, Owen Madden, Johnny McGowan, Richie Noonan. You know, just to mention a few, they were some of the great stars. But then, you know, Cork United were a team of stars. They were a team of internationals. You know, they were all stars. And then I remember when Shamrock Rovers, the famous Shamrock Rovers, just come down. They were another great team of stars, and this place would be jammed. You'd have 10,000 people, 8 to 10,000 people. Yes, it used to be like a cup final, you know, when Shamrock Rovers just come down.
Of course, this was pre-television days, of course.
Oh, it was, of course, Valerie. That's right.
Relied on the action, on the real action, live action.
That's right. That's right. They were doing, you know, it was great. The atmosphere was great here, you know. And of course, then there were some great hurling games as well.
Yes, I was going to ask you that.
And I remember some great junior games between Blackrock and Brian Dillon's and Black Rovers and the Piershig. But the really big games in hurling were the church and the church tournament and the bicycles tournament. You know, the church tournament, that was the Augustinian tournament, you know, for funds to build or rebuild or refurbish the St. Augustine's Church.
The church.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you had great teams like the Glen, the Bars. You had Thurles Sarsfields, and you had Rathnure from Wexford, St. Vincent's from Dublin, and you had all the top teams from all over the country. And they used to draw crowds in excess of, what, 15,000 people below the hurling pitch. You had all the stars, you had, of course. You had,
so all Cork men came to the Dyke to watch the matches?
Oh God, yes, indeed, yes.
Right.
You had, you asked me about the stars, I named the stars and some of the stars in the soccer, of course. Oh God, you had Christy Ring, of course. Christy was... What can we say about Christy? He was, you know, he was the king. And I saw Christy down there give many a great display. There were other great players, of course, from Glen Rovers as well at that time. You had Paddy Donovan and you had the Buckley brothers and Jim Young, you know. And our Blackrock team, of course, my own Blackrock team, we had great stars, and John Quirk and Paddy Hayes and Paddy Fox Ahern and many more. The Bars then were littered with stars as well. Sean Condon, Mick Kennefic, and Denny McCarthy and Tom Mulcahy, Jim Horgan and many more. And God, they were, looking back, Valerie, they were great days. They were great days, sporting-wise they were great. And of course another memory then of the Dyke would be, I remember during the summer evenings, during the summer, the Piper's Amusements. And we was called them the Merries, of course. We used to come each summer, and we spent many happy evenings down there. And the night would always finish with milk and cakes below in McCarry's on Washington Street. And I remember Noel Skipper Campbell, who lived just a few hundred yards down here now, down the Mardyke. And Noel was the greatest boy for to finish off a plate of cakes and 2 or 3 pints of milk. And you know, they must have done him good, because he went on to become a world-famous soccer star after.
So no doubt the strains at the banks of my own lovely Lee would be heard, would they?
Oh God, no doubt, no doubt.
Are you a singer yourself?
Well, I suppose I could give a bar.
You wouldn't give us a bar, would you?
Where we sported and played, 'neath each green leafy shade, on the banks of my own lovely Lee.
One of the finest views of the River Lee can be had here from Daly's Bridge, commonly known, of course, as the Shaky Bridge. It was erected in 1927 as a pedestrian suspension bridge to replace the old ferry. It was erected through the generosity of one Mr. James Daly, who was a Cork businessman, and so it bears his name. One of the most popular pieces of land in Cork just has to be Fitzgerald Park. It must have been graced by every Corkonian at one time or another over the years. It was named after Sir Edward Fitzgerald, who was responsible for the Cork exhibition, which was held here and in the grounds of UCC. After the exhibition, the grounds were handed over to the Cork Corporation for the people of Cork. And in 1906, they introduced a programme of development to convert the grounds into a public amenity park. Today, the park consists of 18 acres and is one of the most beautiful recreation grounds in the country. It includes a fine display of flowers in both formal bedding and informal arrangements, together with a decorative pond with aquatic plants and a children's playground with playing and gymnastic equipment of the modern type, a bandstand, and some fine examples of sculpturing executed by Cork sculptors, all under the shadow of the many stately trees. One of the attractions around the grounds is a shelter situated in the centre of the park. This was formerly a monkey house, left over from the days of the exhibition. It housed monkeys and peacocks until the 40s. Another treasure of the exhibition days is the elegant Ladies' Rest Pavilion, situated at the main entrance, and it's now converted into a tea house. Situated in the park also is the Cork Museum. This elegant Georgian building was the residence of Charles Beamish, a brewer. Shortly after its erection, Mr. Beamish had the grounds beautifully laid out with a variety of shrubs and trees, and due to the density of the shrubs and their heavenly scented blooms, the grounds, which is now Fitzgerald Park, became known as the Shrubberies, and the house the Shrubbery. In 1867, the house became the home of the Bonsecours sisters when they moved from 11 Dyke Parade. In a few short years, the sisters made such an impression on the people of Cork that many young girls offered themselves as postulants and went to their novitiate in Paris. The increasing numbers brought its own problems, like what happened at 11 Dyke Parade. The house was too small. However, due to generous contributions, help and kindness by some of the people of Cork, the sisters were able to purchase a piece of land on College Road, and there they built a convent, and by the end of 1879 the sisters had left the Shrubbery. With the continuous help from the good people of Cork, more land adjacent to the convent was purchased, and this was the first step towards making the Bonds, as is popularly known, into one of the great medical institutions in the country today. The next owner was Mr. Barry J. Sheehan, who was Mayor of Cork in 1877 and 1884. In 1897, Mr. Cornelius Desmond, a member of the corporation, then became the occupier, until he sold it to the Incorporated Cork International Exhibition Association in 1901 for the sum of £3,300. After the exhibition, it was handed over to the corporation and was converted into a museum and was opened to the public in 1910. Following the burning of the city's municipal offices by the Crown forces in December 1920, the house was utilised as a temporary corporation office, and during the years of the Second World War, it became the headquarters of the air raid precaution for the city. Now we come to the Sunday's Well Boating and Tennis Club. Founded in 1899, it lies alongside the peaceful waters of the Lee, surrounded by scenic beauty. Its clubhouse was built for the Cork exhibition for visiting dignitaries, which included King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra. Although it underwent a major facelift during 1989 and 1990, it is essentially as it was when the royals visited it some 90 years ago. Boating was a major activity among the club members in the early days, and during the summer months the club staged various competitions which involved other boating clubs. In the early years, the club had a magnificent bowling green on the site now occupied by courts 6, 7 and 8. The game was very popular among the senior members and especially the ladies. Records show that club competitions were highly competitive and were held annually from 1918 to 1953. The club were leaders in the south for entertaining visitors from cross-channel, visiting naval vessels, and teams from Limerick, Belfast and other countries, including teams from the various garrison stations in the country. By the end of the 1950s, boating and bowling had unfortunately become a memory. Today, however, tennis and squash are the principal games of the club, and the club's complex is rated among the best in the country. I'm standing here at the gate of the third oldest cricket club in Ireland. Although formed in 1849 as the Cork Cricket Club, the county was added to it in 1874. Over the years it has been associated with the great Cork names. This beautiful sweeping lawn and its elegant clubhouse have been graced by some of the great clubs and players in the world. For instance, one of the most historic moments in the club's history took place on the 15th and 16th of June 1903 during the Cork exhibition, when Cork County were hosts for a Gentlemen of Ireland game versus London County, whose side included the great W.G. Grace. During the second day of play, which attracted huge attendance, Grace, who was described as playing below his normal standard, commented, "How could any man be expected to play cricket in such beautiful surroundings?" In the year 1970, the club purchased their ground, and shortly afterwards they proceeded in a youth development policy which was a great success. Looking back over their colourful history, Cork County has brought championship and pleasure to Cork for a very long time. Now we come to the band field, or should I say what's left of the band field. This plot of ground got its name from an elegant ornamental bandstand which was erected by the Cork Corporation around the 1860s. This stood until the 1940s, when it was replaced by a circular concrete base platform without any railings or roof. During the construction of the roadway in 1982, the platform was removed, thus ending an era of brass band music. Among the bands who used to play in the band field were the Blackpool Band, the Workingmen's Band, the Fair Lane Fife and Drum Band, and of course the Butter Exchange and the Barrack Street Band, both of whom are alive and well today. There was a very high standard of musicians in these bands, largely due to the fact that they were made up by military personnel. With me now is Tommy Cook, who actually played in one of those bands. Tommy, we're actually here now in the old band field. Has it changed an awful lot over the years?
I have indeed, I have indeed.
Yeah?
I can look back now, back to the late 30s, as a schoolboy, of course. My first attendance here at the band recitals was due to my uncles, which I had 5, and they were all bandsmen.
Right.
That's how I got an interest in music, and I used to never miss a recital here on the Mardyke. Now, I can also relate the packed audience that used to be here well before the recital would begin at all. Now, the recital used to begin at 7 o'clock until 9 o'clock on Wednesdays and Fridays. And
Would that be just during the summer now, Tommy? Or
during
would it
the
be all
summer,
year?
from the month of June until August, actually.
Yeah.
And they used to play very, very good programs of music. Now, operatic selections from the great composers, Verdi, Bellini, Donizetti, and also splendid overtures, the classical overtures, and splendid marches beside. Now, we had to give this a variety of music to suit the taste of the listeners. And after the recitals, there used to be great discussions on any mishaps during the recitals. You'd soon hear of it, you know.
You had experts so in the audience, had you?
Oh, yeah, that's what you had. We were terrible critics, and they knew their music too. And you'd be surprised, you'd be amazed, you know, when you hear them discussing this among themselves after, they say, well, he's no fool, he knows what he's talking about, you know. But however, anyway, they would be disappointed if they didn't get a good program.
Right.
So that's why they used to come well before the recital in order to get a place and to get a good view of the band.
And how long would the recital run for? 2 hours, maybe?
2 hours.
2 hours.
From 7 o'clock in the evening until 9 o'clock.
Until 9, yeah.
And they finish up then with the national anthem, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But
when did the actual concerts start? I mean, did they start slowing down eventually, or did they just suddenly stop, or what was the situation?
Yeah, actually what happened was, as the years went by, there was changes here, as you see. The old bandstand, which was over here, on the right,
Island behind us,
and that was demolished, I'd say in the 50s.
Yeah.
Well, then the corporation erected a circular base concrete platform.
Oh yes.
Instead of the old bandstand, the same place actually.
Yeah.
And the members weren't very happy with it because they had no privacy, because young kids, they'd be running around among the members when they were playing, and they'd be knocking music stands, you know, and the music be all over the place, and eventually they ended up playing here against the wall.
Right.
And they had, well, it wasn't much of a difference actually, because you had traffic flowing here on the by road, and every time a car would come along, the band would have to push in towards the wall, so it was very congested. But
Now, do you still play, Tommy?
oh, I do. I still
You do?
play, but no, I'm not with any band at the moment now.
Yeah.
But for my own pastime, like you know.
Yeah.
But they were the happiest memories I ever had.
Yeah.
And I have no regrets actually. But there was also amusing incidents too that used to happen. You know.
Of course.
I would like to relate one, if you don't
Indeed,
mind.
yeah.
We had a selection called the hunting scene.
Yeah.
And in the hunting scene, that selection, there was a trumpet call referring to the huntsman, you know,
Yeah.
on horseback.
Yeah.
And the bugler, of course, would play the certain call, and that would have to be re-echoed. Now, what happened was the solo trumpet player in the band, on this particular occasion, he played the solo. And the other instrumentalist, the other second trumpet player, had to go over here in the orchard. There was an orchard across the road, as you know. And
Right, yeah.
he had to go through the orchard to play the repeat of what was already played,
Yeah.
in order to make it an echo.
Oh,
You see?
yes.
So in the distance you'd hear it, and it was a real echo sound.
Yeah.
However, anyway, he went into the orchard, had his instrument with him, and he was ready to play, to repeat what he was after hearing. With that, a dog came along, chased him out of the orchard, and the conductor was waiting with his arms folded, and we all waited for to hear the repeat, the echo. It was never heard. And he was so breathless, he stopped here at the entrance, and he couldn't play a note. So that was the end of that.
Happy memories, Tommy.
Yeah, well, that chased him out of it, and he said never again.
Did you know that the building which houses Clifford's award-winning restaurant today was once the old Cork County Library? The library opened its doors to the public in March 1933, and for 56 years it served the people of Cork until it moved to new premises on the Farnley Road. With me are Michael and Deirdre Clifford, and they're going to tell me something about the history of the building. Michael, what decided you to buy this particular building in the first place?
Well, first, in the location, we had moved to Cork 5 years ago, and we were in a small restaurant down in Washington Street, and we outgrew that. So they basically were looking for larger premises, and we didn't want to move out to the area because we established a lot of friends, a lot of people, and business was very good for us. So we decided to look around, and this was the first building we saw, and we fell in love with it. Basically, there was a lot of things to be done to it, and the location particularly was one of the most important things. And we investigated, went to the corporation, and they were very kind to us, and from there it grew actually, basically.
Deirdre, there's a lot of history attached to the building. Can you tell me something more about it?
Absolutely. The restaurant is roughly 200 years old. It was formerly the Cork County Library, which I think a lot of people remember it for that. But what a lot of people don't know is the legendary hotelier Toddy O'Sullivan from the Gresham Hotel. In fact, it was his family home. Toddy now is in his 80s, but we had him down recently, and it was wonderful to be able to talk to him because he remembered the house so well, the Adams fireplaces that used to be in the actual restaurants, etc. It's a wonderful old building. It's a listed building. When we were doing it up, we consciously kept all the old cornicings, the old windows. Instead of getting new windows, we took out the old windows, repaired them, and put them back in again. And in fact, some of the windows you'll find have the old sort of wobbly glass. But it's a super building, and both Michael and I are very happy to be in it.
What sort of condition was it in the very beginning? Did you have a lot
It
of
was
work
in a
to do?
very, very bad condition. We had workmen here for roughly 8 months working on the building. Again, it'd be a lot quicker to build something, but when you're renovating it and renovating it to a high standard, you've got to get it right. So roughly it took about 8 months, but it was in very, very bad condition, both inside and outside.
Now, Michael, this is an award-winning restaurant. That must have taken quite a bit of work.
A lot of work. It's a serious kitchen, and everything about it, because we use the best of Irish local food, mainly West Cork. We particularly get a lot of, for example, today Irish potatoes came, the first in them, carrots, asparagus, all local. We've won a lot of awards, but it's through a lot of hard work. We never get tired. We're always looking for ideas, working with a very sort of, we have a team of 10, and I work very close to them. We all get on as a family base, like a family sort of business.
Now, you're also a resident, of course, of the Mardyke now.
That's right.
What sort of a place is it to live?
very lovely sort of, a lot of walks you can see from a lot of greenery around, lovely scenery, particularly at night time when you have to across here, everything is lit up, it's lovely. A lot of character as well.
As far back as 1827, the Presentation Brothers have been associated with the Mardyke when they took over the Lancastrian School, which stood on the corner of Washington Street and Wood Street. Declan Healy is Vice Principal of Pres. Declan, how far back does your association with the Mardyke go?
A very long way, Valerie, right back into the 40s, which is some time ago. I was in school here in St. Joseph's above in the Mardyke, and then in the 50s I was in school in Pres, and at the end of the 50s I came back to Pres to teach, so I've been in the Mardyke an awfully long time. As a matter of fact, I even married a girl from the Mardyke, so I've been associated with the Mardyke for a long, long, long time.
Mr. Mardyke, in other words. Now, tell me a little bit about the school in the old days, when you started.
Well, in the old days, we had a very pleasant school in the Mardyke out here with its elm trees and the old gas standards and the Mardyke stream. It was all very pleasant. The school was much smaller than it is now. Again, a very long tradition, a very strong tradition. Thank heaven that still goes ahead. Great old characters, some who have now departed the scene, some still, thank God, with us, but essentially still the same Pres. And I think anybody who has known Pres in the last 20 years, it wasn't greatly different 50 years ago.
Now, would you have a continuation of students, Declan, families?
We would, yes. We'd have quite a long tradition. Some families, we'd be now talking about the 4th generation coming to Pres. I find myself a bit teaching-wise referring to stories that really have to do with the fathers of the children I'm speaking to. So this tradition of family is very, very strong. It's probably our strongest tradition, this family loyalty that you have well over 100 years built up. And it's one of our strengths, as long as you wouldn't get it maybe to take over too strong.
Tell me a little bit about the changes that have happened over the years.
Well, of course, the biggest change now is our new school. It really is very, very fine school. The concept originally was Brother Jerome's and the actual builder, Brother Bartholomew. It was a big decision to make, but really it was time. It had to be done. The old school was more than 100 years old. You couldn't possibly put in the new facilities such as we have gymnasia, media studios, and computer rooms, language labs and so on could not have been put into the old school. So the decision was taken to use the old playing field, because the older generation of pupils would always refer to this site as the rugby pitch. It's no longer a rugby pitch. We do have some tennis courts and a little bit of green, but it's now the actual site of the school.
How many students do you have?
We have 650. Of course, in the old times now, that would have been much less. In the 1960s was when the school began to expand a great deal. It was about 300, say, 350 in the 50s. Then from the 1960s on, it began to expand slowly until we have reached this figure now of 650, and that absolutely is our max. We have chock-a-block, thank God.
How about the future? What do you see in the future for Pres?
In the future, I hope that we would be able to continue the traditions that we have, and at the same time be flexible enough to adapt and to change, because that's absolutely necessary. I don't think you can say we're set, we have the secret, this is how it must be for always. I think the real secret is we have a good solid base, and thank God we have that traditionally, and that we will be able to adapt and change as that is necessary.
And how do you see the future of the Mardyke?
Oh heavens. I have to say that the Mardyke has deteriorated. I mean, the lovely Mardyke we knew as young lads is gone. It's now a main thoroughfare. And unfortunately, possibly circumstances drove the city fathers to it. The lower end of the Mardyke has been ruined. Maybe they could preserve, and I think should preserve, the upper part of it, as I would say, above the bandstand, and to keep it as pedestrianised as possible. I think even the centre of town has shown that Cork's secret is not to make better roads, but to make better facilities for people, for pedestrians and for cyclists, and less cars. The car has, in fact, helped to ruin the Mardyke and the character of the Mardyke. But hopefully it would seem to be the policy of the corporation and the planners at the moment to preserve what is best, and I hope they succeed.
Well, we've come to the end of our stroll along the Mardyke. We have looked back at its past, we have looked at its present, and the many changes that have taken place. As we look towards the future, who knows? But one thing is certain. For those of us who will remember, the Mardyke will always have a special place in the hearts and minds of Cork people.
And then in the springtime of laughter and song, will I ever forget the sweet hours with the friends of my youth as we rambled along amongst your green mossy banks and wildflowers. And then when the evening sun sinking to rest shed its golden light over the sea, the maid with her lover, the wild daisies pressed on the banks of my own lovely lea. The maid with her lover, the wild daisies pressed on the banks of my own lovely lea.
Mardyke.
Oh heavens. I have to say that the Mardyke has deteriorated. I mean, the lovely Mardian and the planners at the moment to preserve what is best, and I hope they succeed.
Well, we've come to the end of our stroll along the Mardyke. We have looked back at its past, we have looked at its present, and the many changes that have taken place. As we look towards the future, who knows? But one thing is certain. For those of us who will remember, the Mardyke will always have a special place in the hearts and minds of Cork people.
And then in the springtime of laughter and song, will I ever forget the sweet hours with the friends of my youth as we rambled along amongst your green mossy banks and wildflowers. And then when the evening sun sinking to rest shed its golden light over the sea, the maid with her lover, the wild daisies pressed on the banks of my own lovely lea. The maid with her lover, the wild daisies pressed on the banks of my own lovely lea.
Yeah, that's Cork, all right, yeah. Famous in song and legend all over the world, boy.
What song, Moya?
What song? The banks of Cork, the banks of me own lovely Lee. But that's our national anthem, yeah? Don't you know that song is sung all over the world, boy? Wherever there's Corkmen. From Dublin to Delhi, and from Tralee to Timbuktu.
You're dead right, Moya, boy. Just no wonder that Cork is so famous, like, you know. I mean, look at all the famous Corkmen that were there, like Jack Lynch.
That's a real Taoiseach.
Christy Ring.
God rest his soul.
Neil Turbine.
All right.
Joe Lynch.
Denny from Glenroe, I know.
And John B. Keane.
And John B. Keane. Well, on a sec now, dear. Well, on a sec, dear now. So John B. Keane isn't a Corkman?
Well, maybe not, but I heard his mother was a Corkman.
I didn't know about that, no, mind you. Still, you're all the same, sir, whatever about that. Cork is the only county that ever won the double. And you can't beat that, sir. No. It's great to be a Corkman, sir. Living in the shadow of Shandon.